All right, today take a look at the electric PCP air compressor. So definitely super well packaged. That's awesome. Oh, look at that. They actually gave us a bunch of these filters. That's awesome. So you got some pressure locking knobs. Looks like we got a rebuild kit in here. We got our line with our quick release chuck. Yeah, all right, that's cool. Neat. Oh, it's a heavier thing than I was expecting. Okay, check that out. So we got our water line. It looks like a silicone, something like that. So that's good. It's gonna be good for like high temperatures and that kind of thing. This is our pump. So this is a water-cooled compressor, so we do need to use this pump to pump the water. So we'll just need to supply a bucket and fill it with water. It's best to use distilled water if you want this thing to last a long time, just because of all the minerals and calcium and that kind of thing you don't want to be sticking inside there. So if you can, distilled water is the way to go. I love all the metal tubing and everything on here. This looks like a very high-quality industrial piece of equipment. It looks like we have a relief valve right here, which is great. So if this thing becomes overpressurized, it's just going to pop this. So we got this guy right here. So if you want to relieve the pressure, you can just loosen this guy up. But when you want it to pressurize, you lock this down. So we got one here, and we got one on the other side. I'm going to keep these things loose because we don't want to start the compressor with those things on. So for a quick release, this thing unthreads. There we go. And we also got a filter pre-installed. So that's awesome. So we have 5 spares. Now that is going to make sure that we don't get water and oil inside of our tank. Of course, you're not going to be able to get 100% of it. If you're going to be using this thing for scuba diving, breathing, anything like that, you're going to be very careful of the oil that you use in this thing, as well as you probably just want to get an air scrubber because you're going to be breathing this in. You don't want to be breathing anything in toxic. But speaking of oil, we've got our sight glass right down here. So it does not come with oil. We do have to supply oil to fill this thing up. So you use 46 weight hydraulic oil. You can use AW46 or ISO 46. It's the same thing. AW just means anti-wear, so to make it last longer. It really depends on what you're going to be using this for. This is an aluminum block, so we do not want to strip this. We just want it to be tight enough. Okay, and I do like that we have a spring strain relief all the way down this line. That's very nice. On the top, we got our on-off switch, we got our temperature gauge, we have an alarm, and we have our pressure gauge. And on that pressure gauge, it goes from 0 to 6,000 PSI. So we're going to keep this at around 3,000 PSI just because the bottles I'm going to be filling are 3,000 PSI rated. Over here on the side, we got our water outlet, we got our water inlet. So you can see we got 2 pieces of tubing, so we're going to connect this one to the pump, and this one is going to drain back into the bucket. So it's just going to constantly flow. So that's pretty much it. We're going to set this thing up. I'm going to put some oil in. It has to stay right in the middle of the sight glass, and if we ever want to drain it out, we just loosen this up. That'll drain the oil out. We could put it fresh new oil in. So yeah, let's go ahead and give this guy a try. So I'm going to use some Miles High-Tech's ISO 46. The reason I'm using this is because that's what I got on hand. Oh, it's like 1 cup is going to get us there. We don't want to overfill it. We don't want to underfill it. We want it to be right about there. So we used pretty much everything of 1 cup, so it doesn't take very much, which is good. And then we don't want to put that sealing cap back on. We want to put this breather on. That way we got some airflow. Okay, just so you can see what that oil level looks like. And it says to replace that oil about every 1,000 hours, so if you're going to, this would be a good time to start keeping a log. So I'll connect the hose to the pump, and then we'll just drop that in that bucket full of water. So it's stuck to the bottom, and I'm going to connect this end to the inlet, so that's on the bottom, and we can connect the outlet. Try to get it as far up that barb as you can get it. I'll stick that end into the bucket. It doesn't have to connect to anything because that's just going to be where it flows from, and plug it in. So there we go. We can see that we got water flow, so we know the water is going into the machine and coming back out. Now, if you got anything that you can use to secure this, if you got a clip or something like that, that would be a good time to use it, but I'm just going to run it like this. I want to make sure we got a good connection onto our coupler. There we go. So we pushed all the way on. If it was off a little bit like this, it's not all the way on. We got to make sure it is completely, fully seated. Okay. So now I'm going to open up both these valves. We want to start out with both those valves opened up so that we can let the thing kind of warm up and get ready before we actually start pressurizing. Make sure it's off, plug it in. So at this point, all we have to do is you have to turn it on, let it run for a couple minutes, let it warm up, watch the temperature, make sure it doesn't get above 75 degrees Celsius. If it does, then you got a problem, you got to shut it down. But after we let it run for a little while, then we'll close these valves back up, let it pressurize, watch the pressure on the gauge, watch the pressure on the gauge on the tank. After we get down to 3,000 PSI, we'll open the valves back up and shut it off again. So 3,000 PSI, we'll open the valves back up, let it pressurize, watch the pressure on the gauge on the tank. After we get down to 3,000 PSI, we'll open the valves back up and shut it off again. So 3,000 PSI, we'll open the valves back up and shut it off again. So 3,000 PSI, we'll open the valves back up and shut it off again. So 3,000 PSI, we'll open the valves back up and shut it off again. So 3,000 PSI, we'll open the valves back up and shut it off again. So 3,000 PSI, we'll open the valves back up and shut it off again. So 3,000 PSI, we'll open the valves back up and shut it off again. So 3,000 PSI, we'll open the valves back up and shut it off again. So 3,000 PSI, we'll open the valves back up and shut it off again. So 3,000 PSI, we'll open the valves back up and back in. We're at 56 degrees Celsius currently. Right now we're at 64 degrees. Again, we just want to make sure we don't get above 75. 64 is okay. Right now we are just passing 1500 PSI. That's 1.5. We want to make sure we're keeping an eye on the gauge on the bottle as well as that gauge, because if they're off, we don't want to overpressurize anything. Just hitting 2000 PSI. So far everything looks good. Cool. So it took a little while, it's a little loud. We got up to 68 degrees, but we are now pressurized. 3000 PSI, we had the same reading on the gauge on there. So I know that we are accurate on both gauges, so that's excellent. A little warm, I'm gonna let that cool down a little bit. So we want to depressurize for a couple reasons. First of all, we don't want to leave this pressurized, but the second thing is because we don't want to pull this line off when this is under pressure. That could be bad. Now that we're depressurized, we can pop this guy off, and we are ready to go. That is a fantastic machine. I am very happy to have that.